The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and quiet shame. Elena Hart sat alone beneath fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly, her fingers laced over her still flat stomach. The intake form trembled in her lap. 6 weeks pregnant. Procedure requested. Termination. Her vision blurred over the ink. This wasn't how her life was supposed to look at 24. She had worked 2 jobs since her mother died. She had survived an abusive stepfather who told her she was useless. She had scrubbed floors in luxury hotels where guests never looked at her twice. She had learned to shrink herself so the world would not notice her. And yet somehow, something ancient had noticed her. She closed her eyes, remembering that night at the charity gala she had only attended because the catering company was short-staffed. She wasn't a guest. She was invisible in a black uniform, carrying champagne on a silver tray. Until he looked at her. Tall. Impossibly composed. Dressed in black that seemed woven from shadow itself. His gaze had found her across a ballroom filled with senators, billionaires, and celebrities. And the world had gone silent. He had not spoken much. Only her name. Elena. As if he had always known it. The nurse opened the door. Miss Hart. Elena stood on shaky legs and followed her into the ultrasound room. The technician was kind. Calm. Professional. Just breathe, she murmured. The gel was cold against Elena's skin. The screen flickered. Silence. Then, one heartbeat. Then another. Then a third. Not faint. Not fragile. Strong. It synchronized. The technician froze. That's not, she whispered, adjusting the settings. At 6 weeks, that's impossible. The room temperature dropped. The monitor glitched. The lights flickered once. Twice. Then the machine shut off completely with a sharp crackle. The emergency lights bathed the room in red. Elena sat up, heart pounding. She could feel them now. 3 pulses inside her. Not weak. Waiting. The fire alarm blared. Shouting filled the hallway. Boots. Not hospital staff. Too heavy. Too coordinated. Men in black tactical gear stormed past the door window. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't a malfunction. It was her. The door handle rattled, but it wouldn't open from her side. She was locked in. Through the glass she saw one of the armed men pause. Look directly at her. Speak into his earpiece. Elena backed away, breath shallow. Then the lights died completely. Darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness, she heard them. 3 steady heartbeats beneath her own. The door opened softly. Not from the hallway. From the wall behind her. A hidden panel sliding aside as if reality itself had decided to bend. He stepped through. As if shadows parted for him. Tall. Pale. Regal. His presence filled the room without effort. Cold and commanding. Yet his eyes, dark as midnight oceans, held something dangerously close to emotion. Elena, he said gently. Her throat tightened. You. She remembered him. The man from the gala. The one whose touch had burned and comforted all at once. You should not have come here, he said quietly. Her fear turned into anger. You don't get to say that. I didn't even know. I know. His voice softened. He approached slowly like someone nearing a frightened animal. Outside boots pounded closer. They are already hunting you, he continued. The council monitors anomalies. 3 royal heart signatures appearing at once. Royal, she whispered. He stepped closer and lowered himself to one knee in front of her. A king kneeling. My name is Adrian Valerius, he said. And I am the Vampire King. The words should have sounded absurd. Instead, they felt inevitable. You are carrying my children. Her breath left her lungs. That's not possible. It is. He extended his hand toward her stomach but stopped short. May I? She hesitated. Then nodded. The moment his palm touched her skin, warmth exploded through her body. The babies responded instantly. 3 distinct surges of energy. Recognition. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, reverence crossing his face. They know me, he murmured. Gunshots echoed in the corridor. Adrian stood in one fluid motion. They intend to extract them, he said, voice turning deadly calm. Alive or otherwise. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. Extract. I will not allow harm to come to you. There was no arrogance in his tone. Only promise. The wall behind him exploded inward. Silver flash grenades clattered across the floor. Men poured into the room. Secure the female, one shouted. Adrian moved. Not fast. Instant. He was between Elena and danger before she could blink. One attacker flew across the room. Another's weapon snapped in half. But there were too many. One aimed directly at her. Elena didn't think. She reacted. Stop. The scream tore from her throat, but it wasn't human. The sound vibrated through the building. Glass shattered. Weapons fell. Men collapsed, clutching their ears. The energy rippled outward like a shockwave. Adrian turned slowly toward her. Or replaced fury. They channeled through you, he breathed. The attackers retreated in chaos. Silence returned, broken only by alarms in the distance. Elena stared at her shaking hands. I didn't mean to. You protected yourself, he said firmly. And them? Sirens wailed outside. More forces were coming. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. You intended to end the pregnancy today. It wasn't accusation. It was fact. Tears filled her eyes. I can barely afford rent. I clean rooms for people who tip in coins. I have no one. How am I supposed to raise 3 children? His gaze softened further. You were never meant to raise them alone. She laughed bitterly. I don't even know you. You will. Another explosion rocked the building. Adrian extended his hand. Come with me. She looked at him. At the shattered room. At the soldiers who had come for her body like she was property. At the warmth still radiating from inside her. They didn't feel like monsters, she whispered. They are not, Adrian said quietly. They are heirs. Her throat tightened. What happens if I refuse? I will respect your choice, he replied. But they will not stop hunting you. Outside, tires screeched. More black vehicles. More men. Adrian's voice lowered to something almost vulnerable. I am feared by nations. Hunted by councils. Resented by my own kind. But I swear to you, no harm will touch you while I breathe. His hand remained extended. Not demanding. Waiting. For the first time in her life, Elena did not feel invisible. She felt chosen. The building trembled again. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm. Protective. The world blurred. Wind roared in her ears. And in the span of a heartbeat, they were gone. Leaving behind shattered glass, fallen soldiers, and a clinic that would never understand what had begun inside its walls. As the city lights vanished beneath them and the mountains rose in the distance, Elena pressed her hand to her stomach. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered. Inside her, 3 steady heartbeats answered. And beside her, the vampire king tightened his hold just slightly, as if afraid she might disappear. The war had begun, and she had just chosen her side. The castle did not rise from the mountains. It claimed them. Elena felt it before she saw it, a pressure in the air like the world itself bowed in reverence. Snow-covered peaks surrounded a massive obsidian structure carved directly into the cliffside. Towers pierced the sky. Iron gates stood 30 feet tall, etched with ancient symbols that seemed to move when she stared too long. Adrian did not speak as they descended onto the stone courtyard. But his hand never left hers. The gates opened before them without command. Vampires lined the path. Dozens of them. Warriors, nobles, guards, all bowing. Not to her. To him. My king, they murmured in unison. Elena felt painfully human in her worn shoes and borrowed coat. She had cleaned hotel bathrooms that cost more than this entire courtyard fountain. Adrian's presence changed as they walked forward. He grew colder. Harder. The warmth she had felt in the clinic vanished behind a mask of absolute authority. He was no longer the man who knelt before her. He was the ruler of an ancient empire. Inside, the castle blended medieval stone with modern technology. Crystal chandeliers hung beside discreet security cameras. Marble floors gleamed beneath iron balconies. Every movement echoed with centuries of history. A tall woman with silver blonde hair stepped forward. Elegant. Cold. Regal. Her eyes flicked to Elena's stomach. Then to Adrian. You confirmed it? She asked. Yes, Adrian replied. The woman's gaze sharpened. 3? Yes. A murmur rippled through the gathered nobles. Triplets? Impossible. The woman finally turned to Elena. I am Lady Seraphine, she said smoothly. High Council of the Night Court. Elena swallowed. Hi. Seraphine did not smile. Humans do not survive royal conception, she stated calmly. Not without transformation. Elena's chest tightened. Transformation. Adrian stepped forward instantly. No one will touch her. Tension thickened the air. Seraphine arched a brow. You would risk the heirs? I would risk everything, Adrian said quietly. The room went silent. Elena stared at him. He meant it. Seraphine studied them both, then inclined her head. Very well. But understand this, Your Majesty, if she weakens, the council will intervene. She is under my protection, Adrian replied. The words were law. Elena was escorted to a private wing overlooking the mountains. The suite was enormous, silk drapes, carved furniture, a fireplace that lit itself with blue flame. It was beautiful and terrifying. When the doors shut, she finally exhaled. Adrian remained standing near the window. You can sit, she said softly. He turned slightly as if surprised by the suggestion. I have stood through wars, he replied. Sitting is optional. She almost smiled. Silence stretched between them. Finally she spoke. Why me? It was not accusation. It was confusion. He approached slowly. Because you were not afraid. I was terrified. You were, he agreed. But you still helped the caterer who dropped the tray. You still defended the intern your manager insulted. You still thanked the valet who no one else noticed. She blinked. You remember that? I notice kindness, he said quietly. It is rarer than power. Her throat tightened. I'm nobody, she whispered. Adrian stopped directly in front of her. You are carrying the future of my kind. His voice softened. You are not nobody. A sudden sharp pain cut through her abdomen. Elena gasped, doubling over. Adrian caught her instantly. Breathe, he ordered gently. She clutched his arm. Something's wrong. His hand pressed to her stomach. His expression shifted. They are growing. Growing? It's only been days. For humans, yes. Fear flooded her. I don't want to become a monster. His jaw tightened. You will not. But your council said. My council fears what they cannot control. Another pulse of energy radiated through her body. This time it didn't hurt. Felt like warmth. Like reassurance. Adrian's voice lowered. They are stabilizing your body. What does that mean? It means they are protecting you. Tears slid down her cheeks. Why would they do that? His eyes softened in a way she was beginning to recognize. Because you are their mother. The word landed heavily between them. Mother. She had walked into a clinic planning to end everything. Now she stood inside a mountain fortress, defended by immortal warriors, carrying triplet heirs to a supernatural throne. It was absurd. It was overwhelming. And yet, when she placed her hand on her stomach, she felt it again. 3 steady heartbeats. Not invasive. Not parasitic. Alive. Later that night, raised voices echoed in the corridor. Elena stepped toward the door and paused. Seraphine's voice cut sharply through the hall. She is human, Adrian. Weak. Fragile. A liability. And yet she survived the council assault, Adrian replied calmly. For now. She channeled royal power at 6 weeks. Pause. That got Seraphine's attention. You felt it too? She asked. Yes. Silence again. Then quieter. If she survives birth, Seraphine said carefully, she will change everything. That is the point. Elena stepped back before they noticed her listening. She didn't feel powerful. She felt small. But something inside her was changing. Not physically. Emotionally. She had been bullied, dismissed, overlooked her entire life. Now the most feared beings in existence debated her survival. And the Vampire King defended her without hesitation. A knock came softly. Adrian entered without waiting. His posture less formal now. They will test you, he said. For what? For weakness. She lifted her chin slightly. And if I fail? You will not. You sound very sure. He stepped closer. I have ruled for centuries, he said quietly. I have watched empires fall and tyrants rise. Strength is loud. Cruelty is obvious. But true power. His gaze held hers. Is quiet resilience. She swallowed. I don't know how to be strong like you. I do not need you to be me, he replied. I need you to be yourself. Another wave of warmth pulsed inside her. He felt it too. Their eyes locked. The moment stretched. Slow. Heavy. Intimate. He did not touch her. But the space between them burned. Finally he stepped back. Rest, he said. Before leaving he paused at the door. Elena. Yes. You are not a prisoner here. Then what am I? His answer was quiet. My queen if you choose to be. The door closed softly behind him. Elena stood alone in the mountain fortress, heart racing. Outside, snow fell over ancient stone. Inside, 3 royal heartbeats echoed through her body. For the first time in her life, she did not feel powerless. She felt necessary. And somewhere deep within the castle walls, Enemies were already planning. The first whisper reached Elena before sunrise. They're convening. She felt it in the air, tension humming through stone corridors, footsteps moving faster than usual, voices lowered in secrecy. By the time Adrian entered her chamber, fully dressed in formal black, Elena already knew. It's today, she said. He did not ask how she knew. Yes. The Night Council had called an emergency assembly. Not to celebrate the heirs. To judge her. Elena stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her stomach had begun to round, not dramatically but unmistakably. The growth was faster than normal. The babies were developing at an accelerated pace. She placed her hand over the curve. They're not going to like me, she murmured. Adrian stepped closer behind her reflection. They do not need to like you. Just tolerate me? They need to respect you. She gave a soft, nervous laugh. That might be harder. His expression softened. They fear what they cannot predict. You are human. That makes you unpredictable. She turned toward him. And what if they decide I'm too dangerous? His eyes darkened. Then they will answer to me. The council chamber was carved into the mountain's heart. Circular. Massive. Lit by floating crystal orbs that glowed silver blue. 12 elevated seats formed a ring above the central floor. 12 ancient vampires. Each one older than most nations. Each one powerful enough to command armies. And today, all eyes were on her. Elena walked beside Adrian, feeling painfully aware of every step. She wore a deep crimson gown provided by the castle attendants. It was simple but elegant. She did not look like royalty. She looked like a woman trying not to tremble. Adrian did not touch her. But his presence was a shield. Seraphine spoke first. Elena Hart. Human. 24 years old. Occupation, hospitality service worker. No supernatural lineage. Pause. Currently carrying 3 royal heirs. Murmurs filled the chamber. One of the elders leaned forward. How did you survive conception? Elena blinked. I didn't realize it was something people don't survive. That is not an answer, another snapped. Adrian's voice cut through calmly. Control your tone. The elder leaned back but did not apologize. Seraphine's silver eyes narrowed. Have you experienced symptoms? Yes, Elena answered honestly. Heightened senses. Sudden temperature shifts. Energy surges. Have you craved blood? Someone asked sharply. The question burned. She hesitated. Yes. Whispers intensified. Adrian's jaw tightened. And have you acted on those cravings? Seraphine pressed. No. Her voice steadied. I don't want to hurt anyone. A long silence followed. An older council member with deep-set golden eyes spoke slowly. You understand that if your body rejects the transformation, the heirs may perish with you. The words hit like ice water. I'm not rejecting anything, Elena replied. I'm just trying to survive it. Survival is not enough, another said coldly. Royal heirs require strength. Elena felt something flicker inside her. Not anger. Resolve. With respect, she said carefully, I have survived things none of you ever had to. A ripple of surprise. She continued. I grew up in a house where love meant fear. I worked since I was 16. I buried my mother alone. I walked into a clinic because I thought I had no future. And I'm still standing. Her voice trembled, but she did not look down. If strength means cruelty, I don't have it. But if it means enduring when you have every reason to collapse, then I am stronger than you think. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Adrian's gaze never left her. Seraphine studied her carefully. Prove it, the elder with golden eyes said. Before Elena could respond, a sudden wave of pressure filled the chamber. Psychic. Oppressive. The council testing her. Elena gasped as invisible force pushed against her mind. Her knees buckled. Adrian moved, but Seraphine raised a hand. No interference. Elena hit the floor. The pressure increased. Voices whispered inside her skull. Weak. Human. Unworthy. Tears blurred her vision. Then, warmth bloomed inside her womb. 3 pulses. Strong. Protective. The pressure faltered. The babies responded. Energy radiated outward from Elena's body, not explosive like before. Controlled. Steady. The council members stiffened. Crystal lights flickered. Elena slowly rose to her feet. The whispers stopped. Her breathing steadied. She did not scream this time. She simply stood. The energy around her settled into calm strength. Seraphine lowered her hand slowly. She stabilizes instinctively, she murmured. The elder with golden eyes nodded once. Interesting. Adrian finally stepped beside Elena. Not shielding her. Standing with her. Seraphine addressed the chamber. The human has endured psychic trial. The heirs respond in unity. This has not occurred in recorded history. One council member scowled. It makes her more dangerous. Or more necessary, another countered. A debate erupted above them. Elena swayed slightly. Adrian's hand hovered near her waist but did not touch. You did well, he said softly. I thought I was going to pass out. You did not. After several tense minutes, Seraphine rose. The council recognizes the human as protected royal vessel. A formal title. Not queen. Not equal. But not expendable. Elena exhaled slowly. The session ended. As they exited the chamber, whispers followed her, but they had changed. Not dismissal. Consideration. In the corridor, Elena finally leaned against the wall. I didn't know I could do that. You did not, Adrian said. They did. She touched her stomach. They don't want me to be afraid. They are already bonded to you. She looked at him. And you? A rare flicker crossed his face. I am learning, he admitted. Learning what? How to want something without trying to control it. The honesty stunned her. For a king who commanded armies, that admission was vulnerability. Footsteps approached. A young vampire guard bowed. My king. Scouts report movement near the northern ridge. Adrian's expression hardened instantly. The council remnants? Yes. They are regrouping. Elena's stomach tightened. They're coming again, aren't they? Yes, Adrian said calmly. But this time? His gaze held hers. We are ready. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, alliances were shifting. Elena had survived her first trial. But war was no longer distant. It was approaching the gates. And for the first time, the council was no longer certain whether the human girl was their weakness or their greatest weapon. The attack began at dusk. Not with explosions. Not with screams. With silence. Elena felt it before the alarms sounded. She was standing on the balcony outside her chamber, watching the snow melt into silver mist against the darkening sky. The babies had been unusually still all afternoon, as if listening. Waiting. Then, every bird in the forest took flight at once. The sound was deafening. Adrian appeared beside her instantly. They're here, he said. No panic. Only certainty. Below, the fortress gates sealed with a thunderous grind of reinforced steel. Torches along the outer walls ignited in synchronized flame. Warriors took positions along battlements. The vampire king shifted into something ancient and terrible. Cold authority wrapped around him like armor. Elena, he said, turning to her. You go to the inner sanctuary. No. The word left her before she could second-guess it. His eyes flashed. This is not a request. And I'm not fragile porcelain, she shot back. The babies pulsed. Agreement. Adrian's jaw tightened. You are carrying the heirs of the Night Throne. And I am also a person, she replied, breath unsteady but voice firm. You told me strength is resilience. Let me prove it. For a moment he looked torn between king and man. Then, he nodded once. You stay behind me. At all times. The first explosion shattered the northern watchtower. Fire arced against snow. Figures poured from the forest below, not mindless soldiers but organized factions bearing the insignia of the Old Covenant. They moved with brutal precision. UV cannons mounted on armored trucks fired beams against the stone walls. Silver-laced projectiles cracked against the battlements. The mountain roared. Inside the fortress courtyard, chaos erupted. Elena flinched at the sound of combat. Metal against metal, inhuman speed colliding in flashes of violence. But this was not the wild brutality she expected. It was war. Strategic. Calculated. Adrian stepped into the courtyard. The moment his boots touched the stone, everything shifted. Vampires bowed their heads briefly before rejoining the fight. Their king had entered the field. Corvin emerged from the treeline. Immaculate suit. Unruffled. Even in battle. Adrian, he called smoothly across the courtyard. Still hiding behind stone walls? I defend what is mine, Adrian replied evenly. Corvin's gaze slid past him. To Elena. There she is, he murmured. The human who believes she can sit among immortals. Elena felt the sting, but she did not look away. Corvin smiled faintly. You should have chosen safety, girl. I did, she answered quietly. And you were not part of it. The insult barely registered before the next assault wave surged forward. Battle swallowed the courtyard. Adrian moved like controlled devastation, disarming, incapacitating, defending. He did not revel in destruction. He neutralized it. Every time a Covenant soldier advanced toward Elena, they were intercepted. But the enemy was relentless. A blast struck near her position. The shock wave threw her against the stone pillar. Pain shot through her shoulder. She gasped. Adrian's head snapped toward her instantly. Elena. Before he could reach her, 3 Covenant operatives broke through the defensive line. One lunged. Elena stumbled backward. Fear surged, sharp and electric. Then something inside her answered. Not rage. Protection. The babies pulsed in perfect synchronization. Energy radiated outward, not explosive this time but focused. The air between her and the attackers compressed like invisible gravity. The operatives froze mid-step, unable to advance. Their weapons trembled in their hands. Elena stared, breath shallow. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't lashed out. She had simply refused to fall. The energy held steady. Controlled. Adrian reached her side, finishing the threat in seconds. He turned to her, eyes blazing, not with anger. With astonishment. You contained it, he said. I didn't want to hurt them, she whispered. And that was the difference. She did not crave dominance. She chose restraint. Across the courtyard, Corvin watched carefully. Fascinating, he murmured. He raised a hand. The second wave retreated abruptly. Smoke curled into the night sky. Snow melted into blackened slush. The Covenant forces pulled back into the forest as quickly as they had come. Silence fell again. The fortress still stood. Damaged, but standing. Adrian exhaled slowly. They were testing our defenses, he said quietly. And me, Elena added. Yes. He turned to face her fully. Her hair was disheveled. Her gown torn at the sleeve. Blood, not hers, stained the stone nearby. But she stood upright. Unbroken. You were magnificent, he said softly. She laughed breathlessly. I was terrified. Courage is acting despite fear. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. Snow began falling again, gentle this time. In the distance, the council elders emerged from the inner hall, surveying the aftermath. Seraphine approached slowly. You held your own, she admitted. Elena blinked. Is that approval? It is acknowledgement. I praise apparently. Adrian stepped slightly closer to Elena, not possessive. Protective. You see now, he said to Seraphine, why she survives. Seraphine studied the human woman carefully. She does not fight like us. No, Adrian agreed. She protects like a mother. The words landed differently this time. Not clinical. Not strategic. Sacred. Elena felt tears sting unexpectedly. Later, as the courtyard was cleared and the wounded tended, Adrian escorted her back to her chamber. The adrenaline faded. Fatigue crashed into her like a wave. He caught her before she could stumble. You overextended, he said gently. I didn't want to be weak. You are not weak, he replied firmly. He guided her to sit. For the first time since she arrived at the fortress, he knelt before her again. A king kneeling. He brushed snow from her hair carefully. You remind my people of something we have forgotten, he said quietly. What's that? That power does not require cruelty. The room felt smaller, warmer. Outside, the mountains smoldered under moonlight. Inside, something shifted between them. Slow. And real. He reached toward her stomach hesitantly. May I? She nodded. His palm rested gently over the curve. The babies responded instantly. Warmth spread through both of them. 3 heartbeats. Steady. Strong. They trust you, he murmured. She swallowed. I think I'm starting to trust you too. His breath caught, barely. But she noticed. The night had burned. The fortress had been tested. And the human girl had not broken. But somewhere beyond the mountains, Corvin was smiling. Because tonight had confirmed something dangerous. Elena was not merely carrying royal airs. She was becoming something far more powerful than anyone had planned. And the next attack would not be a test. It would be a reckoning. The dreams began 3 nights after the attack. Elena stood barefoot in a field of silver ash. The sky above her was split in 2, one half drenched in burning sunlight, the other swallowed by endless night. In the distance she saw 3 small figures standing between the divide. Not infants. Not yet children. Silhouettes of light and shadow intertwined. They turned toward her in unison. And spoke without words. Choose. She woke gasping. The chamber was dark. But the castle was not asleep. She could feel it now, every heartbeat in the fortress, every footstep in distant corridors. Her senses had sharpened again. The pregnancy was accelerating. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman nearly 6 months along. It had only been weeks. Fear tried to rise. But beneath it, the babies were not chaotic. They were deliberate. A soft knock sounded at the door. Adrian entered before she answered. He looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. Burdened. You felt it, she said. Yes. He approached slowly. There was a surge through the ley lines beneath the mountain. Ancient magic stirring. The council believes Corvin is preparing something larger. Elimination? She asked quietly. Domination. He didn't sugarcoat it. He believes if the heirs are born under his control, he can reshape vampire society entirely. And if they're born under yours? Adrian's gaze held hers. They will have the freedom to choose their own path. The word lingered. Choose. Just like in her dream. Elena, he said carefully, there is something you must understand before the final weeks. Her chest tightened. Final weeks. At their current rate of development, you may give birth within 10 days. The air left her lungs. 10? Yes. She moved toward the window, steadying herself. That's not enough time. For what? To figure out who I am in all this. He stepped closer. You are their mother. I was a maid 6 weeks ago, she whispered. Now I'm expected to anchor an entire species. You are not expected to anchor us, he said quietly. You are expected to love them. Silence. She turned to him. Would you still protect me if they weren't powerful? The question struck deeper than she intended. His answer came without hesitation. Yes. Even if they were ordinary? There is nothing ordinary about a child born of you. Her heart stuttered. Slow burn affection had grown between them through crisis and fire. But this was different. He wasn't speaking as king. He was speaking as a man who had watched her choose compassion again and again. A sudden wave of pain gripped her abdomen. She inhaled sharply. Adrian caught her before she fell. The warmth followed immediately after. Not distress. Communication. They're trying to show me something, she murmured. Show me. She closed her eyes. And this time, she didn't resist. The vision unfolded around them. Not a dream. A shared projection. The chamber dissolved into shimmering light. Adrian stood beside her in a vast hall she had never seen before. Thrones lined both sides. Vampires of every faction gathered. No chains. No war. No fear. At the center stood 3 grown figures, luminous, balanced between light and dark. Their eyes identical to Adrian's. Their smile unmistakably hers. A future not ruled by terror, but by unity. The vision shifted. The same hall, but burned. Empty. Ash drifting like snow. A throne of bone at its center. Corvin seated upon it. Alone. The vision ended. Elena opened her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. They're not weapons, she whispered. No, Adrian agreed softly. They're bridges. He understood now too. The babies weren't meant to conquer. They were meant to reconcile. For centuries, vampire society had been divided. Traditionalists like Corvin clinging to dominance, reformists like Adrian pushing for coexistence. The triplets represented evolution, choice, balance, and that terrified the old powers. A horn echoed through the mountain. Urgent. Adrian's expression hardened. They're breaching the southern wall. Already? She whispered. This is the final push. He turned toward her. Elena, you must go to the inner sanctum. The birthing chamber is shielded by ancient wards. She shook her head. No. His eyes flashed. This is not negotiable. She stepped closer. You said they need freedom to choose. That starts with me. Elena. I will not hide while others bleed for me. He stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression changed. Not resistance. Acceptance. Then you stand with me, he said quietly. Together they descended into the courtyard once more. This time the assault was heavier. Corvin stood at the front line openly now. No subtlety. No restraint. You've delayed the inevitable long enough, he called out. Adrian stepped forward. You mistake inevitability for entitlement. Corvin's gaze shifted to Elena. You feel it too, don't you? The transformation nearing completion. Yes, she answered steadily. And you still believe you can remain human? She lifted her chin. I believe I can remain myself. That answer unsettled him. Corvin signaled. Elite operatives surged forward. The battle ignited again. But this time, Elena didn't wait for fear. She reached inward deliberately. Connected. The babies responded. Energy flowed through her body in controlled waves. Not violent. Stabilizing. The courtyard air shifted. Vampires fighting on Adrian's side felt it first. Strength. Clarity. Focus. Their movements sharpened. Their coordination improved. Elena wasn't attacking. She was amplifying. Adrian realized it mid-strike. She's harmonizing us, he breathed. The Covenant forces faltered. Corvin's composure cracked. This is impossible. No, Adrian replied coldly. It is evolution. The battle turned. Not through destruction. Through unity. Corvin retreated under heavy resistance. Before vanishing into the forest, he called out. If she survives birth, the world you know will end. Elena's voice carried clearly across the battlefield. Maybe that's the point. Silence followed. The Covenant withdrew. For now. The courtyard stood battered but victorious. Adrian turned to her slowly. You shifted the tide without killing. I don't want to rule through fear, she said softly. His eyes held something profound. Then you are already greater than most kings. Snow began falling once more. But this time it felt different. Not ominous. Hopeful. Elena placed her hand over her stomach. The babies pulsed gently. Steady. Almost ready. The war was not fully over. But its ending had changed. And in 10 days, the future would arrive. The wind howled across the prairie like a wounded spirit, rattling the shutters of Caleb's ranch house. Inside, the oil lamp flickered, casting trembling shadows across the wooden walls. Anna stood by the window, her fingers pressed to the glass, her heart pounding with a fear she could not name. Caleb had not returned. He had ridden into town at dawn to confront Sheriff Harlan about the forged land deed, the same deed Silas Crow had used to claim half the valley. By sunset, the sky had turned the color of spilled blood, and still there was no sign of him. Anna's chest tightened. She had lost too much already, her family, her homeland, her trust. She would not lose him too. Outside, hooves thundered. She rushed to the door, flinging it open as a rider stumbled into the yard. It was not Caleb. It was Thomas Reed. The young ranch hand slid from his saddle, blood staining his shirt. Miss Anna, he gasped, barely able to stand. They've got him. Crow and the sheriff. Locked him in the old freight barn near the rail line. Her breath caught. Is he alive? Thomas nodded weakly. For now. The world seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. Then something inside Anna hardened like tempered steel. Stay here, she said firmly, helping Thomas inside. You'll live. I promise. She wrapped his wound as best she could, her hand steady despite the storm raging within her. When she finished, she reached for Caleb's rifle mounted above the hearth. The shy mail-order bride who had arrived months ago with trembling hope in her eyes was gone. In her place stood a woman forged by betrayal and love. The freight barn loomed at the edge of town, its wooden boards creaking in the wind. Lantern light flickered through the cracks. Anna tied her horse behind a stack of barrels and slipped toward the side door. Voices drifted through the walls. You should have signed the land over, Morgan, Silas Crow sneered. Would have saved you the trouble. Caleb's voice came back, bruised but unbroken. That land belongs to every family in this valley. You'll hang before you take it. A sharp crack echoed, fist against flesh. Anna's vision blurred red. She pushed the door open just enough to see inside. Caleb was tied to a post, blood at the corner of his mouth. Sheriff Harlan stood nearby, pretending indifference while Crow circled like a vulture. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She stepped fully into the doorway and raised the rifle. That's far enough, Mr. Crow. 3 heads snapped toward her. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Crow laughed. Well now. The little bride thinks she's a gunslinger. Anna's hands did not shake. Untie him. Sheriff Harlan shifted uneasily. Ma'am, you don't want to? I said untie him. Something in her voice, steady, cold, fearless, made the sheriff hesitate. He glanced at Crow. Crow reached slowly toward his holster. The rifle fired. The bullet struck the lantern beside him, exploding it into darkness. Flames licked up the dry hay scattered across the floor. Chaos erupted. Caleb lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into Crow as the sheriff stumbled backward. Smoke thickened the air. Anna rushed to Caleb, cutting the rope binding his wrists. You shouldn't have come, he rasped, gripping her arm. And leave you? Her eyes flashed. Never. The barn groaned as fire spread along the beams. Outside, townsfolk began to shout, drawn by the blaze. Crow staggered toward the exit, but Caleb tackled him into the dirt just beyond the doorway. The sheriff, coughing, raised his hands as several ranchers arrived with rifles. It was Crow. Harlan shouted. He forced me. But the truth had ridden in on flames and courage. Crow was dragged to his feet, fury and defeat twisting his face as the fire consumed the barn behind him. Hours later, the valley stood under a quiet sky once more. Crow and the disgraced sheriff were locked in the town jail, awaiting a judge from the territory capital. Caleb sat on the ranch house porch, a bandage wrapped around his ribs. Anna stood before him, her face pale but resolute. You could have been killed, he said softly. She knelt beside him. So could you. He studied her as though seeing her for the first time, not as the fragile woman who had stepped off the stagecoach months ago, but as the fierce heart who had saved his life. I was wrong about something, he admitted. What's that? I thought I was protecting you all this time. He reached for her hand. Turns out, you were strong long before you came here. Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight. I wasn't strong. I was afraid. And you came anyway. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her smile held steady. This is my home now. I'll fight for it. He pulled her gently into his embrace, holding her as though the world itself might try to take her away. In the distance, the prairie wind softened, carrying with it the promise of dawn. The valley was scarred but not broken. And neither were they. Morning came slow and pale, as if the prairie itself were hesitant to face what the night had revealed. Smoke still lingered in the air where the freight barn had burned, curling like ghosts that refused to leave. Anna stood at the edge of the porch, watching the horizon blush with light. Her body ached, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been. Last night had changed everything. Behind her, Caleb stirred. You didn't sleep, he said quietly. She shook her head. Neither did you. He joined her, leaning carefully against the porch rail. The valley spread out before them, rolling land, hard-earned fences, soil paid for with sweat and blood. For the first time since Anna arrived, it felt like it truly belonged to them. But peace in the West never came without a price. A rider appeared on the distant road, kicking up dust as he approached. By the time the horse reached the gate, Anna's stomach had tightened into a knot. It was Judge Whitaker's messenger. The man dismounted, hat in hand. Caleb Morgan, he said formally. You're ordered to appear in town by noon. Judge Whitaker wants testimony before sentencing Crow and Sheriff Harlan. Caleb nodded. I'll be there. The messenger hesitated, then glanced at Anna. Ma'am, your name was mentioned too. Anna's breath caught. Mine? Yes. Some folks are saying a woman has no place drawing a weapon in a dispute like that. Others say she saved a man's life. He shrugged. The judge wants to hear it from you. When the rider left, silence fell heavy between them. Caleb turned to her. You don't have to go. Anna met his gaze. Yes, I do. Town felt different in daylight. Windows that once held suspicion now reflected curiosity. Whispers followed Anna as she walked beside Caleb down the main street. Some faces showed admiration. Others judgment. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. Crow sat in chains, his eyes burning with hatred when they landed on Anna. Sheriff Harlan looked smaller, already broken by the weight of exposure. Judge Whitaker listened as ranchers spoke, as Thomas Reed testified through clenched pain, as Caleb told the truth without anger or mercy. Then Anna was called forward. Her heart pounded, but she stood tall. Miss Anna, the judge said, studying her carefully. Did you fire a weapon during the incident? Yes, sir. Might I ask why? She swallowed once. Because no one else would. Murmurs rippled through the room. She continued, voice steady. I came to this valley afraid. Afraid of being unwanted. Afraid of being powerless. That night I realized something. Fear doesn't disappear when you wait. It disappears when you act. The judge leaned back, thoughtful. Crow sneered. You're letting a woman's tears sway you. Anna turned to him, her voice like iron. Those aren't tears. They're the cost of surviving men like you. Silence crashed down like thunder. Judge Whitaker brought the gavel down hard. Enough. By sundown, the verdict was clear. Silas Crow would hang for fraud, violence, and attempted murder. Sheriff Harlan was stripped of his badge and sentenced to hard labor. Justice, slow and scarred, had finally arrived. That evening the valley gathered, not in fear but in quiet unity. Lanterns glowed. Coffee was poured. Children laughed where once they hid. Anna stood among them, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Belonging. Caleb found her near the corral. The judge offered me something, he said. She searched his face. What kind of something? He wants me to run for sheriff. Says this valley needs someone who won't look away. Her breath caught. That's dangerous. He nodded. So is doing nothing. She took his hands, grounding herself. If you do this, it won't just be your fight. A slow smile touched his lips. I was hoping you'd say that. The sun dipped low, setting the prairie ablaze with gold and fire. Anna leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She had crossed an ocean of fear to get here. And now, standing in the fading light of the American West, she understood. Love wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of standing your ground. Election day in the valley did not come with banners or brass bands. It came with dust, tension, and eyes watching from behind curtained windows. Caleb Morgan stood outside the general store, hat low over his brow, greeting each rancher who passed. Some clasped his hand firmly. Others nodded without speaking. A few walked by in silence, loyalty to the old ways clinging to them like stubborn mud. Inside the store, ballots were being cast under the careful supervision of Judge Whitaker. Anna waited near the hitching post, pretending to adjust the reins on her horse. In truth, she was studying faces. She had learned to read people since coming west, who carried fear, who carried resentment, and who carried secrets. A black carriage rolled into town just past noon. It did not belong to anyone in the valley. Anna's stomach tightened. Two men stepped out, well-dressed, polished boots too clean for prairie dust. One of them unfolded a paper and scanned the street like he owned it. Caleb noticed them too. They moved toward the courthouse with deliberate confidence. Anna followed at a distance, unease prickling her skin. Inside voices rose. That land deed Crow tried to enforce, one of the strangers said smoothly, was backed by an Eastern investment syndicate. My employers. Judge Whitaker's jaw hardened. Crow forged signatures and used intimidation. Perhaps, the man replied calmly. But the syndicate still holds a claim to mineral rights beneath this valley. And they intend to collect. The room went still. Mineral rights. Whispers began immediately, gold, silver, oil. Rumors that had floated for years like campfire smoke suddenly felt real. Caleb stepped forward. You're saying men who've never set foot here believe they own what's under our soil? I'm saying, the stranger replied coolly, that progress is coming. Rail expansion. Mining operations. Prosperity. Of course, small ranch holdings would need to be consolidated. Anna felt the meaning settle like a stone in her chest. They weren't finished fighting. Not even close. By late afternoon, the votes were counted. Caleb Morgan had been elected sheriff. Cheers rose from half the crowd. The other half stood uncertain, caught between hope and fear of what change might bring. Anna found Caleb just outside town as dusk approached. He held the folded paper announcing his victory, but his expression was heavy. This isn't over, he said quietly. No, she agreed. It's only grown bigger. He exhaled slowly. If there's gold under this land, they'll send more than lawyers next time. Anna looked toward the horizon where the sun bled into shadow. Then we prepare. He studied her face. You didn't hesitate. She met his gaze. I didn't cross an ocean to be chased off by men in polished boots. A faint smile touched his lips despite everything. But their moment was broken by a distant sound. An explosion. Both of them turned sharply toward the northern ridge. Smoke curled into the darkening sky. That's the Carter Ranch, Caleb muttered. Without another word, they mounted their horses and rode hard. They arrived to chaos. Part of the Carter barn had been blasted open. Livestock scattered. Mr. Carter knelt in the dirt, his face pale with fury and fear. They left a message, he rasped, holding up a wooden plank. Burned into it were the words, sell or suffer. Anna's blood ran cold. Caleb dismounted slowly, his jaw tightening. Anyone hurt? Not yet, Carter said. But they weren't aiming for the barn. Anna followed his gaze. The explosion had been close, too close, to the Carter home. A warning. Caleb turned to the gathering ranchers who had arrived behind them. This is what those men call progress. Anger simmered through the crowd. Anna stepped beside him. She could feel the shift in the valley, the fragile unity from the night of the fire now being tested by something far more powerful. Money. Industry. Greed. Caleb's voice carried across the darkened field. We stand together or we lose everything. Not just land, but our homes, our families, our future. Eyes turned to Anna as well, remembering the woman who had walked into a burning barn without flinching. She lifted her chin. They think we're small because we're scattered. They think we're weak because we're ordinary. Her gaze swept across every frightened face. Let's prove them wrong. The prairie wind rose again, tugging at skirts and coats, carrying with it the scent of smoke and something else. War on the horizon. As the stars began to pierce the night sky, Anna understood one thing with terrifying clarity. Love had brought her to the valley. But now she would fight to defend it. The explosion at the Carter Ranch changed everything. By sunrise, fear had spread faster than prairie fire. Ranchers gathered outside the church, voices clashing in low, urgent waves. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others whispered about selling before things turned worse. Anna stood beside Caleb, now wearing the sheriff's badge that still felt new and heavy on his chest. The silver star caught the morning light, but it brought no comfort. They won't stop at one warning, Caleb said quietly. No, Anna replied. They're testing us. Before he could answer, a rider thundered into town from the southern ridge. It was Jacob Miller, a rancher who had lost half his cattle last winter. They're offering cash, Jacob shouted as he dismounted. Double market price. Contracts ready to sign. Protection guaranteed if we agree. The words hit like a bullet. Protection guaranteed. Anna's stomach turned. From who? From themselves? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Doubt flickered in tired eyes. The valley had endured drought, blizzards, outlaws. Some wondered if fighting wealthy Eastern investors was a battle they could survive. Inside the church, an emergency meeting was called. Voices rose. We can't fight rail companies, one man argued. They'll bring jobs, another insisted. They'll bring dynamite, Mr. Carter snapped back. Caleb stood near the front, letting them speak. Anna watched carefully. The valley was no longer united by a single villain like Crow. This enemy wore fine suits and carried contracts instead of guns. Division was more dangerous than dynamite. Finally, Caleb stepped forward. If you sell, he said evenly, you won't just lose land. You'll lose control. Today it's mineral rights. Tomorrow it's fences. Then it's homes. And if we don't sell, someone challenged. Then we stand together, Anna answered before he could. Every head turned toward her. Her voice did not tremble. They believe we'll break because we're afraid. Maybe some of us are. I was afraid when I came here. Afraid of being alone. She glanced briefly at Caleb. But fear only wins when we let it divide us. Silence settled over the room. Jacob Miller shifted uneasily. Easy to say. Harder when your children are hungry. Anna walked closer to him. If they buy you out, what happens when the mine runs dry? Do you think they'll care where your children go? He had no answer. That afternoon, Caleb rode north to inspect the blast site more closely. Anna insisted on going with him. The ridge overlooked the entire valley, fields stretching wide beneath an endless sky. It was beautiful. Peaceful. Too peaceful. Caleb dismounted near the charred earth where the explosion had started. He crouched low, studying the ground. Professional, he muttered. Not random. Anna scanned the horizon, and froze. A glint of sunlight off metal. Caleb. He followed her gaze. On the far hill stood 3 riders watching. Not hiding. Watching. One tipped his hat mockingly before they turned and rode off. A message. We can reach you anytime. Caleb's jaw tightened. They want us scared. Anna's pulse raced, but beneath the fear, something steadier was forming. Resolve. That night, the valley split quietly. 2 ranchers signed contracts under lantern light. 4 refused outright. The rest hesitated, caught between hope and dread. At the ranch house, Caleb removed his badge and set it on the table. I swore to protect this valley, he said. But I can't protect men who choose to surrender it. Anna stepped closer. You protect them by giving them courage. He looked up at her weary. And if courage isn't enough? She placed his badge back in his hand. Then we remind them what they're fighting for. A knock thundered at the door. Caleb reached for his rifle. Anna moved beside him. When he opened it, Thomas Reed stood there, breathless, shaken. They've taken Jacob Miller, Thomas gasped. Said he changed his mind about signing. They grabbed him on the road. The room seemed to tilt. So this was the next step. Not offers. Not warnings. Kidnapping. Caleb's eyes darkened with something fierce and unyielding. They've made a mistake, he said quietly. Anna felt it too, the shift from defense to action. The valley was no longer choosing whether to fight. The fight had come to them. Outside, thunder rolled across the prairie though the sky was clear. The storm was coming. And this time, it would not be contained to one barn or one ranch. The storm broke before dawn. Not with rain. but with riders. Caleb gathered every rancher willing to stand. Lanterns flickered across grim faces. Some were young and shaking. Others old and scarred by past wars. All understood what this meant. Anna tightened the strap on her saddle. "You don't have to ride into this," Caleb said quietly. She met his gaze. "I didn't come this far to watch from the porch." For a moment he simply looked at her, not the frightened bride who once stepped off a stagecoach, but the woman who had faced fire, gun smoke, and greed without bending. He nodded once. They rode north. The mining syndicate had set up camp near the ridge, temporary tents, crates of blasting powder, armed guards pacing confidently. They hadn't expected resistance. Not real resistance. Jacob Miller was tied near a wagon, bruised but alive. When the valley riders crested the hill, the guards stiffened. Caleb rode forward slowly, badge shining against the pale morning light. "This ends now," he called out. One of the suited men from town stepped forward, calm as ever. "Sheriff Morgan. I assure you, this is a misunderstanding. You kidnapped a man. He breached a contract. He never signed it." The man's smile faded. Behind Caleb, more riders emerged. Mr. Carter, Thomas Reed despite his healing wound, widowers, fathers, brothers. Not an army. A community. The syndicate guards reached for their rifles. So did the ranchers. Anna's heart pounded, but she held steady, scanning every movement. The wind picked up, whipping dust between the two sides like a living thing. Then Jacob found his voice. "I didn't sign," he shouted hoarsely. "And I won't." That was all it took. The first shot rang out, but not from the valley's side. Chaos exploded. Smoke. Shouting. Horses rearing. Anna saw one guard aiming toward Caleb's exposed side. Without hesitation she fired, striking the man's rifle clean from his hands. Caleb tackled another attacker, disarming him with raw force. Ranchers surged forward, not as scattered farmers, but as men defending their homes. The fight was fierce but brief. The syndicate men hadn't expected unity. They hadn't expected resistance backed by conviction instead of fear. Within minutes, the guards were disarmed, their leader pinned to the ground beneath Caleb's boot. "It's over," Caleb said, breathing hard. The man spat dust. "You think this stops progress?" "No," Caleb replied evenly. "It stops tyranny." Anna cut Jacob's bonds. He collapsed into her arms, shaken but alive. In the distance, a fresh group of riders approached. Judge Whitaker at the front, alerted by the commotion and smoke from the ridge. When he saw the armed camp and restrained men, his expression turned to iron. "This land dispute," the judge declared after hearing enough, "will be brought before territorial court. Until then, all operations are suspended. Any further aggression will be treated as organized criminal action." The syndicate leader paled for the first time. Money could buy influence, but not when witnesses stood united. Weeks later the ruling came down. The syndicate's claim was invalid, built on manipulated surveys and illegal coercion. Heavy fines were issued. Arrest warrants followed for those who ordered the violence. The valley remained in the hands of the families who worked it. Not because they were powerful, but because they stood together. That evening, under a sky painted in gold and violet, the valley gathered once more, this time not in fear but celebration. Children ran between lanterns. Music drifted across open fields. Laughter replaced whispers. Anna stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the sun sink behind the ridge that had nearly torn their lives apart. Caleb approached quietly. "It's peaceful," he said. "For now," she replied softly. He smiled. "The West will always test us." She slipped her hand into his. "Then we'll keep standing." He turned to face her fully. "When you first arrived, I thought I was offering you a home." "You did." He shook his head gently. "No. You built it. You fought for it." Emotion shimmered in her eyes, not fear this time but something deeper. Belonging. The prairie wind brushed past them, softer now, carrying the scent of grass instead of smoke. Anna looked across the valley, at ranches saved, at neighbors united, at land earned through courage. She had crossed an ocean believing she was coming to find love. Instead she found strength. She found purpose. She found a valley that would not bow. Caleb kissed her beneath the fading light, not as a rescuer and a rescued, but as equals. And as the first stars pierced the twilight sky, the American West stretched endless before them, wild, uncertain, and full of promise. This was their land, their fight, their future.